Now we get to the final Shadow of the Unmade for the month, and this time it's for a movie I have not talked about at all. So, no reference for this one in previous videos. Buddy of mine sent a link on Reddit to a bunch of Halloween scripts a couple years ago, many of which I read outside of the 3 I did this month. Two Faces of Evil, Ven's Asylum, and this. The other 2 had histories behind them, but this one did not. The only thing that is known is that it was a spec script written by Daniel S. Duvall and Fernley Phillips. It takes place in 2000, I assume the year it was written as it is undated, and it was to be a sequel to H2O. It's hard to find information about it since it pretty much shares the title with the movie we got, which was Mustafa Akkad's stipulation. It had to have resurrection in the title, so people knew that Michael Myers was coming back. So, this makes me believe it was written around that time and not, much later. The 2 writers, Duvall and Phillips, only have 1 credit to their name each. For the former, it was producing a filmed live concert for the band 10,000 Maniacs, and for the latter, it was writing and co-producing the critically hated but decent moneymaker The Number 23 with Jim Carrey, which he had written 2 years after this. Again, if we're going by the alleged date. Considering it was only a spec script, it's unlikely that this even got to Miramax or Troncos, and was only written due to their interest in the source material. With that, the script is certainly an interesting one. Not perfect, but it certainly would have been better than the movie we got, which isn't saying much, but why not judge it for yourself? Let's get into it. The script opens with a horror film playing on a portable TV. The person watching it is none other than Lee Brackett himself. He sweeps it to the ground and it shatters. His home is filled with clutter and a shrine to his daughter Annie. He prays to it and then exits his home. It's revealed to be a shack in the middle of the woods. He walks down a long road to an open graveyard, which looks nearly abandoned. Cut to a suburban home. A father is loading suitcases into his car, along with his family. We see other families doing the same. They're in a hurry and panicking. It starts to make sense when we see the title card superimposed on the screen, Haddonfield, Illinois, October 30th, 2000. A teen watches in her car named Madeline, who is a stereotypical punk, calls the family's chicken shits for leaving the town as she drives past them. Cut to another house where we see a nerdier girl named Hannah working on a project with her twin brother Mikey, who dresses similarly to Madeline. The doorbell rings and Mikey answers it, and we see Madeline, who he has a gigantic crush on, hence the similar look. She brushes past him and enters the house. She sees the projects they've been working on. For Hannah, a bunch of physics books, and for Mikey, a model airplane. She has a back and forth with them when the doorbell rings again. Hannah goes and answers it so Mikey can have a bit of alone time with Madeline. It's a guy named Nick, a stereotypical leather-bound cool guy. From context clues, Hannah has a thing for him. He said he wanted to surprise their friend Alice, who they plan to hang out with later. Nick comes off as a bit of a dick, and Mikey doesn't like his energy. They all chat a bit more when the doorbell rings again, which turns out to be Alice, who is described as cheerleader hot. Steve, her boyfriend, had to bail because of his aunt dying or something. So the gang's all here, and Nick gives her a big bear hug, with Madeline saying that tonight's gonna be great. Cut back to the cemetery where they're playing with a Ouija board. Madeline starts the process while Mikey is nervous around a certain gravestone that reads, Michael Myers, 1958 to 1998. They continue the process. There are some ghostly events, but nothing crazy. Mikey hears noises, and soon we see the Shape. He is brandishing his famous mask and a glistening butcher's knife. They all start screaming until Alice doubles over in laughter. It turns out this Shape is none other than Steve, setting up a whole prank which Alice was in on. They breathe easier about the whole thing, and Steve even admits that it's the actual mask of Michael Myers, which apparently was in a museum that Steve works at. Soon they hear some other noises in the darkness. A silhouetted man with shears comes out and they all scramble away. Alice grabs the dropped mask and the man grabs her wrist. It turns out to be Brackett. He warns them about being in the cemetery a day before Halloween until he sees the mask and lets her go. Nick warns him about touching his girl, and he yells at them as they run away that they're all going to die. Cut to the porch of Hannah and Mikey's house. They all hang around and Steve starts to sing with his guitar while smoking pot. Mikey lets it slip that the old guy was in fact Brackett. They talk about him for a bit and reveal that he left the state years ago and went to Florida, which was the explanation that was given in Halloween 4. There seems to be some love triangle shit with Nick, Steve, and Alice. Mikey eventually stands up and goes into the house, and Steve follows him. It's now fully revealed that Steve is now dating Alice, as before it was only context clues, to Mikey while the latter takes an aspirin. Steve threatens Nick, but Mikey calms him down, saying that he can trust her. Hannah is crushing on Nick, but Madeline states she's too smart for guys, and it's hinted that Madeline likes her. Back inside the house, Mikey leaves. Steve and Alice discuss their relationship, and they urge the other to tell Nick they are together. Steve then is about to say something as he heads out of the house, but decides to grab his stuff and leaves. Mikey wants to go to sleep because of a headache. They all agree to see each other tomorrow. Cut to Steve. He sees he forgot to take back the mask and then starts the engine again. Hannah is experimenting with makeup to get guys to like her. Mikey lies in bed like a corpse. Madeline covers herself with perfume to hide the pot smell. She tiptoes into the house. Her father, Sheriff Johnson, is there waiting for her. He states she was grounded, she lies, and says she was just at Hannah's. He smells her breath and it's clean. Nick drops Alice off at her house. Nick follows her, wanting the devil's tango, but Alice states her parents are home, but Nick states that they're asleep and they'll be quick. They enter the house and Nick kisses her, but she pulls away and brings him into the living room. They talk for a bit and it's revealed that Nick flunked out of college. Alice is getting ready to tell him something. We see them from outside and Alice draws the curtains. Cut to the next morning and her mother knocks on Alice's door. When she enters, she screams. Cut to emergency services at her house along with her friends from last night. Steve is crying. Alice was killed last night due to multiple stab wounds. The sheriff takes notes from her friends as they were the ones who saw her last. Steve states that Nick took her home. So the police will try to find him and they wheel out her covered body. Mikey is weirdly fascinated. Cut to the four of them at the twins' house, Hannah and Mikey, talking about the situation. They discuss that Michael maybe killed her, maybe Nick. Hannah suggests that Steve did it. Maybe he walked in on them screwing and killed her since Nick is twice the man you are. He glares at her during an awkward silence. Mikey still has a headache. Madeline remembers what Brackett said. You'll be the ones to die. Cut to Brackett's shack. Madeline picks the lock as the others stand watch. They enter. They notice a bunch of different things. Documents that read Loomis, and other papers strewn about. Their Ouija board, too. They go over his shack until they find the shrine to Annie. Mikey tells them all the info. They decide to leave, only to find Brackett waiting outside. They run away with Brackett saying, "Let the dead rest in peace, especially the evil ones." Cut to the sheriff's office. They're still trying to find Nick, where it's revealed he got expelled for a bar fight. They find something out about the case when the kids burst in and claim that Brackett killed Alice, and Steve reveals his prank with the Myers mask to the sheriff. The sheriff then reveals that Michael Myers' DNA was at the crime scene. Cut to the sheriff at the museum, which is in fact the old Myers house. Inside, there are relics of the past like Loomis's trench coat and other such treasures. Steve takes the sheriff up to where the mask is, and it's gone, despite Steve promising he put it back. They start to leave when the sheriff also notices that the original knife that was used to kill his sister was also gone. He gets a call. He asks if the knife had a marble handle, and Steve confirms this. Cut to the road with tons of emergency services. There they find Nick's car with his crumpled body still inside with a knife in his back. The knife that was in the museum with a marble handle. The sheriff looks at Steve. Cut to the twins' house. Mikey is trying to make chocolate milk and Hannah is drawing herself a bath. He goes to find her and finds her undressing. She notices him but doesn't say anything. She gets most of her clothes off when the phone starts to ring. She opens the door to find him gone and that he's going to get more milk. She answers the phone and acts worried and sees Mikey leaving the house and calls out to him, but he doesn't hear her and he continues on his way. The sheriff is interrogating Steve, saying he did it, and Steve is denying everything despite the fact they had his prints on the knife. He states that he cleaned the knife prior, hence why his prints are on it. But the sheriff doesn't believe him. Madeline tries to start her car, but it won't start, so she starts leaving on foot. Mikey reaches the store, but people left for Halloween, so he walks away to find another store. Madeline is walking, nervous, and bumps into a couple from school. Somebody is watching them, and the POV goes from Madeline to the couple. The couple make it to a house and prepare for an evening of debauchery when someone kills both of them before they get started. Cut to Madeline and Hannah sifting through old photos. They're convinced that Steve is the one who killed Alice with the serial killer look he has. Mikey enters and finds them. They reveal that Nick was found dead, hence why they were going through these photos. Mikey pipes up that Steve said he was going to kill Nick, but didn't think he would kill Alice too, relatively unfazed by the news that someone else turned up dead. Then police cars pass their house. They find the bodies of the couple while the owner of the museum, a man named named Gosnell tries to sell tickets to the museum. Cut back to the station. Steve is free to go, his parents confirming the story that he did clean the knife, hence the prints, as well as others dying while he was in custody. The sheriff tells Madeline to go to the twins' house and stay there with the three of them and watch them closely. They head back to their house, talk about how maybe Gosnell is doing this to stir up business, and then joke that maybe they should ask Michael Myers and hold another seance. But then, everyone is genuinely starting to consider it. They get back to the house and do in fact hold another seance. Mikey pops another aspirin and they get started, but nothing happens. They talk about how Michael might not actually be dead, despite Laurie chopping his head off, so they want to dig up his grave. All of a sudden, Mikey blows out the candle, heads to the window as daylight streams in, and he collapses. They run over to him and he wakes up being relatively okay. He states he needs to lay down. They lay him down and decide to dig up Michael's corpse. Cut to Gosnell at his museum giving a tour to some tourists. One of them, named Sam, is trying to pitch a theory that Michael didn't really kill his sister and that it was really her boyfriend and he gave Michael the knife and was acting traumatized this entire time. He's trying to write a book. Another guy asks to use the bathroom and stares at the axe that killed Michael in its case and continues on his way. Cut back to the group digging up Michael. They hit coffin. Cut back to the bathroom at the museum. Somebody is trying to get in, but when the guy opens the door, no one is there. He starts to head back up to Gosnell, still giving his tour, who arranged the body of Michael to come back here to increase tourism. He looks at the case containing the axe. It's no longer there. Then his eyes bulge. Blood trickles from his mouth as he looks down and the axe is protruding from his stomach. Cut back to the group. They're picking sticks to see who opens the grave. Madeline draws the short stick. Cut back to Gosnell giving his tour. Talk about the possible voyeurism of young Michael. Sam's wife, Jill, has him get another roll of film from her car. He gets there, grabs it, loads the film into the camera, and snaps it shut. He notices the side door is open. He goes inside thinking it's all one big marketing ploy to scare tourists. He snaps some pics while the floor creaks when he turns and snaps a picture of a knife going into his shoulder blade. He screams and Gosnell and Jill turn. Cut back to the group. Madeline opens the casket and it's filled with bricks. Cut back to the museum. Sam crawls to the base of the stairs where Jill and Gosnell see him, and then in steps Michael Myers. He grabs the knife out of Sam's body. Gosnell then shoves Jill down the stairs, where she lands on Michael's knife. He tosses her and starts going after Gosnell, who runs into Michael's old bedroom. He locks the door and makes it to the window, sealed shut while Michael is pounding on the door. Gosnell breaks the window with a bat on the wall and the alarms wail. He tries to make it out of the window and Michael pulls him back in. He hits him with the bat. Does nothing, and then Michael stabs him with the splintered broken bat repeatedly. Cut back to the group with them running to leave the cemetery when they run into Sheriff Johnson. They tell him what they found, but he's aware. Michael is in an unmarked grave to help prevent grave robbers. A man is behind them holding a weed spear. Of course, as he gets closer, they scream, but it turns out to be Brackett. He tipped them off that they were here to Johnson, who then gets a call on his radio about the museum. Cut to the sheriff at the museum, and it's cordoned off with caution tape. The sheriff tries to address the townspeople who question if Michael is back. He cannot confirm nor deny, so the townspeople start panicking and get the hell out of Dodge. The sheriff at this point does not give a fuck and lets them leave and tells the teens to do the same, and they plan to go to her father's cabin. Madeline hugs her father. Cut to the twins' house and Mikey is sleeping. He's having a nightmare about Alice, and Hannah jostles him awake so that they can leave. They're on the highway trying to leave, but with everyone else having the same idea, they're stuck in traffic. Mikey is solemn, and Madeline is nervous about her father. Steve then decides to go back to his house for his guitar, and Hannah berates him for going back. Steve goes into the house. The electric bill is past due, so no lights. He finds the guitar with a flashlight when the phone rings. It's his parents telling him about their vacation, but then the line goes dead. In the car, they're still waiting for him when Steve comes running out with his guitar, and they head out. But he checks by the mailbox first to see that the telephone bill was also past due, so no Michael here. They burn rubber and get the hell out of Haddonfield. Cut to the sheriff. He's in the station while talking with police officers all around town to try and find Michael. Nothing at the school or hospital or town center. Sheriff says keep your eyes out, and he can't hide forever. Cut back to the teens who arrive at the cabin. Hannah states that the nearest neighbor is 7 miles away, how much you want to bet that'll bite them in the ass later, and powers on the generator. They head inside. It's a luxurious cabin. Mikey puts his bag upstairs, and Madeline and Steve get excited about the indoor hot tub. When asking if he wants to join in, Mikey says that he doesn't feel like it and walks off. The others continue to explore the house while Mikey unloads his modeling tools in his bedroom. Hannah lights a fire, and Steve starts playing his guitar. Madeline is seen carrying a shotgun. When asked what for, Madeline states, "You know what they taught us in health class. Always carry protection." Mikey is with the group and staring out the window. He says that Steve is his best friend, and he starts playing a song for Mikey on his guitar, which is just making fun of him, and he decides the jacuzzi is good after all. Cut to Brackett on a forest road walking in the direction of the cabin. Madeline and Hannah are filling the tub and are kind of flirty. They start to get undressed in the changing room. They go back and forth about bathing suits when Madeline finally kisses her on the lips. Cut to Mikey and Steve in the hot tub having fun, and Steve tells Mikey to get the others, and he walks in on them kissing while Madeline is also naked. Hannah is screaming at him to get out to the point she pushes him out the door, but she feels bad and opens the door and he's gone. She's wallowing because she knows how much Mikey has a crush on Madeline, so Madeline decides to wear a bathing suit that Hannah states is see-through. Madeline and Steve are having fun while Hannah goes to find Mikey, who is staring at himself in the mirror. He traces lines on his face with his finger, then does the same line with an X-Acto knife. He looks at himself as the blood seeps through his cut and then does the same line, mirrored. Hannah enters the changing room but can't find him. Cut back to Mikey, whose face is now cut to hell. He then grabs glue and starts running his finger over the cuts. Hannah is still looking for him. He then admires himself as his face is now a patchwork of cuts and glue. Then he goes into his duffel bag and pulls out the mask of Michael Myers. He slips it over his head, unflinching and unfeeling. Hannah enters the room. She looks around to see Michael, but not Myers. She thinks he killed him, only to see that her brother is now a killer. Hannah is screaming, and the others eventually hear it. They get to the main landing as Hannah runs out screaming and jumps down the staircase, skidding across the floor. They see Mikey, and they think it's a joke. He's cold and methodical. Hannah states he's crazy, that he glued the mask to his face and cut it up. They see the blood pool down further, and he starts to go down the stairs as Steve tries to use his guitar to defend himself. The girls get their clothes on. He's halfway down the stairs as Steve is saying he could beat him in the 5th grade, and sure as shit can beat him up now. Mikey is in front of Steve, who smashes the guitar over his head. Mikey grabs the guitar string and starts to strangle him with it. While Hannah is able to stop him for a second, he lobs his head off with the metal string. He walks towards them as they scream. Mikey is no longer the shy boy he was. He is now the Shape. They run to the car. They try opening the car, but Hannah doesn't have the keys. She turns and the Shape holds them up. Madeline states she wished she had her shotgun right now, and Mikey then holds up the shotgun as well. After Madeline calls him possessed, they realize that the seance might have caused him to be possessed by Michael Myers. He shoots the gun at Madeline, which shatters the car window. They then start running into the forest despite being barefoot, but they can't focus on the pain right now. They have to keep going as the Shape advances. Madeline falls as she hurts her ankle. Hannah then grabs a large stick and they hide amongst the trees. When he comes into a clearing, Hannah hits him with the large stick and knocks the gun out of his hand. Madeline and the Shape both grab the gun and have a tug of war over it while Hannah beats him with the stick. He tugs the gun free, causing Madeline to be forced back. He aims the gun at Hannah, and right when he's about to fire, Madeline hits him with a rock and the gun fires, missing Hannah. She keeps hitting him with the rock as she tells Hannah to run, and she does so. She turns to see the Shape point the gun at Madeline, and Hannah gets worried, except click. Madeline tells him the gun can only hold 2 bullets and calls him a dumbass. She hits him again with the stick, and they both take off running. Madeline, with her hurt ankle, is lagging behind, and they go in different directions. The Shape is on the hunt, but for who? That's when Madeline snags herself on thorns, and the Shape chooses her. She goes further into the thorn bush as she's slashing about to get free, but the Shape can't get into the bush. She is covered with her own blood. The Shape begins to tug on a vine which tightens around her neck. She tries to get free but can't. The vine snaps. Madeline is sitting there limp, dead. Hannah screams and runs again. She runs out of the woods and the Shape disappears. She hears a crunch and turns around. It's a deer. There is a bit of relief, but it bolts with a shadow creeping up on her. She grabs another stick and tries to stab it, but it turns out to be Brackett. He tells her he knows of the threat. She points to the Shape 20 yards away. Brackett brought a tranquilizer gun, but he fumbles with it too long, and the Shape knocks the gun out of his hands. They run down the gravel path. They get back to the cabin where they see Steve's dead body. Brackett grabs a curtain and puts his body and head together together and covers him up. They try for the phone, but the power goes dead. He's at the generator. Brackett decides to go out and find the tranquilizer gun. He said he'll knock 3 times when he returns, and Hannah begrudgingly agrees. He goes outside and she locks the door after him. He goes back towards the woods when he starts hearing voices of the past, the last time he ever talked to Annie. He wipes his eyes and continues. Cut to Hannah, who starts lighting candles from Brackett's knapsack, and she also finds holy water and the rites of exorcism. There's a high-pitched scratching sound coming from the kitchen. Cut back to Brackett. He looks at an owl on a tree branch. With the cover of night, he's trying to find the gun. When he sees Annie perched on a tree branch where the owl was, she tells him to stop the evil for her. She says he can do it, and he steps forward towards her and bumps into the gun. He grabs it and looks up again and sees that the owl replaced her on the tree branch. Cut back to Hannah. She is going towards the kitchen. She grabs a knife, but then she hears the 3 knocks and goes towards the door. We see outside the kitchen window, the shape is standing behind a tree. She opens the door, Brackett comes in and locks it. She asks if this will work, and Brackett says that a tranquilizer gun put Michael down temporarily in 1989 by Loomis, once again making the Thorn trilogy canonical, much like Halloween Asylum. And Brackett read everything from the man, so he thinks it will work again. But Hannah states it's her brother. Not anymore, Brackett says. He goes up to the roof where Hannah tries to drive the shape out with old memories. Brackett shoots at something, but it turns out to be a scarecrow. We see the shape advance on Hannah. She screams for Brackett, but he keeps fumbling with the ammo. The shape grabs a hatchet and tries to slice Hannah, but it gets caught in the car roof. Hannah kicks him in the kneecap and then in the balls and says they're from Steve and Madeline. She goes inside the house and locks the door. Right when Brackett is going to shoot him, he disappears under the porch. He goes back into the house through the window. The shape is assaulting the door and Hannah backs away. Brackett grabs the gun and makes his way downstairs. The shape then crashes through the window, grabs a shard of glass, and makes his way towards Hannah. Brackett throws the gun at Hannah. She grabs it and shoots the shape in the neck. He staggers back a bit and pulls the dart from his neck. He then drops to his knees and locks eyes with Hannah before falling unconscious. Cut back to the sheriff's office, and Sheriff Johnson sees the picture that Sam took before he got killed. It drains the color from his face. It's Michael Myers. Cut back to the cabin. Brackett ties the shape to a chair and Hannah is putting candles all around him. They're preparing to exorcise Michael out of Mikey. They don't know if it'll work though. They have the holy water and rites of exorcism. Brackett injects him with a clear fluid that wakes up the shape. They begin to exorcise him. The candles go out and ignite, and Brackett tries to get Mikey to come back to them. Hannah begins talking to him like it's her brother and does it for hours. And when she thinks she's reached him, he grabs her wrist and surprise, surprise, it didn't work. Brackett gets her free. She tries to rip the mask off his face. He gets his legs free and kicks her across the room. The shape gets his arm free and grabs Brackett's face and puts it near a candle. It then extinguishes it, and then the shape puts his boot on Brackett's neck and he tells Annie to run to Hannah. She starts to when Brackett's neck eventually snaps from the force. She runs down a path in the woods and passes a sign that says Haddonfield Logging Company. She appears on the site and hides behind some logs. The shape then arrives soon after, brandishing a knife. He considers grabbing a chainsaw but thinks the knife is good. He walks into another direction. Hannah goes to a trailer, the field office of the logging company. She manages to get inside and calls the police. The shape is getting closer. She slams the door shut and deadbolts it. She connects with the sheriff and the shape is no longer at the window. She says, "He's here, please help me," as she backs away towards a window and the shape busts his arm through the window. The sheriff hears it. The shape crushes the phone. He climbs into the trailer. Hannah grabs a letter opener and stabs him in the collarbone. He falls back through the window, halfway out and halfway in. She runs out. He pulls the knife out of his torso and starts to follow her as she disappears behind a pile of logs. It's a maze of logs as she bobs and weaves through them. She hears various thuds when she looks up and sees the shape on top of them. He pushes a log towards her and it falls on her leg. He steps down and she heaves it off of her leg. She limps to the direction of a crane. She hoists herself up, trying to get into the seat as he claws at her legs. She hits his hand with her good leg and snaps a couple fingers back. She gets into the cab and tries the key. She tries to start it, but it dies. The shape busts his way through the window and Hannah slams his hand onto a jagged piece of glass. He falls back and she starts the crane. She starts to drive it and the shape stands up near a log pile. She swings the crane back and asks Mikey to forgive her as she returns the arm at top speed and hits the log pile, which slams down on top of the shape and it buries him. Police cars enter the lumber yard. A medic treats Hannah as they're going through the log pile and find the shape is still alive. Cut to the vine bush. The sheriff then cuts through it to reveal that his daughter is still alive. They embrace as they get her a stretcher. Dissolved to Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where we see Mikey, covered in bandages with some blood splotches here and there, sitting upright in bed. His arms and legs are bound. Madeline and Hannah are looking at him through an observation window as he looks at the wall catatonic. They both think that maybe Mikey will come back to them, but their faces say otherwise. They leave hand in hand. Back to Mikey. The EKG reads a heavy rhythm. His head then slowly pivots to the observation window as his heart rate accelerates and the movie fades to black. So that is Halloween the Resurrection. Not a perfect script, but as I said, it would have been better than the one we got. It feels more like a Halloween film. The characters are decently likable. It has a bit of mystery to it that I liked. It keeps Michael dead and Laurie alive, thank God, and the third act was pretty awesome. The idea of a lesbian romance in a movie in 2000 wasn't totally revolutionary, but an interesting aspect to see. The things I didn't like is that it takes a bit to get going, and it does suffer from post-Scream trends, much like H2O. I'm willing to bet money on the idea that the main reason the writers included this was because of the whodunit aspect of Scream, and not because they were looking to do something unique. Despite this, I still liked it, even though it was extremely obvious after a certain point who the killer was going to be if it wasn't going to be Michael. But I know why it was there. The idea of Michael actually being a demon of sorts that possessed someone and then trying to exorcise them with a seance is kinda dumb, not gonna lie. But I'll take that over Busta Rhymes going, "Huh?" and kung fu fighting Michael Myers and hitting him with an impromptu bow staff. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the fucking hell out of it, but it's not actually good. Ironically so, maybe, but I want to keep rappers and kung fu out of my Halloween movies, thank you very much. The characters are a bit one-dimensional and feeling more like stereotypes than anything else, aka a typical slasher movie, which is what Resurrection also felt like most of the time, so it would have given us a slightly better, relatively generic slasher. Nothing amazing, but better than it being insulting to many Halloween fans by having Laurie killed off in the first 5 minutes and having Michael switch places with someone in the dumbest and most contrived way possible. Here, they simply just made someone else the Shape, which probably would have gotten a lot of hate for the time, but maybe in hindsight would have been well liked, even though how he became the Shape was a bit idiotic. I'm sure this was a rough draft, so maybe subsequent drafts could have been better. But again, the reason this wasn't chosen was because it was a spec script, which means it wasn't commissioned by anyone specific and was just floating around Hollywood and didn't get picked up. Akkad or the Weinsteins probably didn't even read the damn thing, if I were to guess. But that is it for the 3 Halloween scripts of Shadows of the Unmade. I do have one more Halloween related video / post Monster Madness video in a couple days, so see you soon for that.